defense. All right, here we go. We'll start with Utah. We've mentioned them with Stevenson Sylvester joined us earlier, but man, I just love the way they play. They host Baylor. I just love the way they play, who they are, their identity, and everything about them. And they host Baylor at 2:30 on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough for Baylor to contain or match the physicality that Utah has. It's going to be a tough place to play. Look, they haven't been great on the road or at home the last couple of years, so it's even hard to see what they're going to be there. I think they'll play okay. I think that Utah is just so much better than Baylor. And, like Southern Utah, you can't really judge anything on that. But if Cam Rising can move around like he did and Brant Keithy doesn't look like anything happened and that they're completely healthy, they're going to be tough to beat for anybody. And, this is just going to be a tough game for Baylor. I think Utah's going to be one of the class teams of the country. And, we'll get a good view of Baylor and where they really stand compared to a super talented team early on. But I really like Utah and what they can do.
I mean, I think Utah's a good team. I think it remains to be seen how good they are. They beat Southern Utah. So what? That's not anything that was unexpected. They were a favorite coming into the year, so they went and they handled their business against the team they should have handled their business against. And now we'll see what they look like in week 2. It was very encouraging seeing what you saw, but I think this idea of like they're just going to destroy people remains to be seen. And that very well could happen this weekend. But I don't think we know nearly enough about Baylor to know that for sure, which we'll talk about them in a different pod. But we do know Utah's good. Just how much better they are than other teams in the league, that's what we'll find out over these coming weeks. But, I expect them to win this weekend. They looked really good a week ago. And just to see Keithy and Rising, that's probably getting tiring hearing of just them all the time. Dijon Stanley had a great game. Defense was good. There's a lot to like there beyond those two. But obviously, since we hadn't seen those two in so long, it was important to see them, just like it was important to see Jalen Daniels for Kansas and just see what he looked like playing. And they passed that test with flying colors. They're 2 touchdown favorites. So I understand like the perception of them being so good. But I don't think anybody has any clue of how like where Baylor is, like good, bad, or otherwise. It's impossible to know based on last week, especially how they stack up with the Utah. So this will be a great game from an informative standpoint on both sides. And I do think that Utah will win this game, and I think that they'll just move on along as one of the favorites, and rightfully so.
I was on a station in Salt Lake City earlier in the week, and they asked me about what Baylor, and they're either high or they're low. Now, they had the team 2 years ago that just faded down the stretch and then no-showed for the game with Air Force 6-7. That could have been like an 8-4 team. But it's right. They're either 1-11 or they're 12-2. Or, the teams that go to a Big 12 championship game and lose to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. They had that really good run back in the early 2000s, 2010s, that kind of carried over. But they have been a roller coaster, and I have no idea who they are. You disagree?
Yeah, I disagree. They were 6-7 2 years ago.
I just mentioned that.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about high or low, though. That's right down the middle.
No, I said they're either high or low. That team in 2022 could have been like an 8-4 but they fell apart.
Matt Rule had a 7-6 team in year 2. So, I know what you mean. But, I think it's more of like they're not high or low. They're just anywhere. They've been everywhere is where they've been over the last decade. Yeah, it's impossible to know for sure. And I sure as hell don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced of anything other than I think they're improved. And, last year, neither starting quarterback played. So it's, and that Baylor's starting quarterback's not even back this year. So it's just, it's hard to tell. And that's why these early games are so great, is to give us some more evidence. And, if Baylor goes up there and gets blown out, then, that'll be something to talk about. But I'm very intrigued. I definitely think Utah's the rightful big favorite here, but we'll see what happens. And I think in general, they're right where you'd want them to be. They'll really get tested here in a couple of weeks. They get Oklahoma State on the road. They'll get Arizona right after that. But maybe this is a test this weekend. I mean, it's a little taste of the Big 12. That's what we get, even though it has no bearing on the conference standings.
And the Big 12 is about to get a little taste of Utah, too. So it'll be fun, even though this is a non-conference game. All right, let's now move on. The other teams involved, including that game, Colorado, Zach Gelb just brought that up. They are in Lincoln. They beat Nebraska up last year. Even in that game, though, the Shedeur was sacked like 6, 7, 8 times, but they still won pretty easily. I watched them, and I'm unlike everybody else here. I watched them. I know that they have some flaws, but what's the guy? Is it Wester, one of the receivers? You have
Jonte
Horn, you have Hunter. They've got some dudes now. Now, again, can they protect Shador? That remains to be seen. But I don't even know if it matters because how really a magician he might be when he has the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to see the conflicting styles in this game. Look, if I'm Matt Rule, I mean, this is a game plan that works out for me really well to, keep it simple. Look, you have to limit their possessions. You can't just kind of keep giving them the ball back. That's what they did last year. They kind of kept it tight early on, and then you throw in a couple of Jeff Sims fumbles here and there, and then, bad mistakes. And then a team that's already trying to get a ton of possessions has even more because you spotted them the ball. And so it got out of hand in the second half of that game, but they kept it close early enough to where you could see that the fundamental styles are conflicting enough to where if people, and I think a lot of probably people adopted this game plan against Colorado late when they could, was if you limit their possessions, you can keep this within the fairway, and I think that's what you're going to do. They're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to drain the clock. They're going to do their best.
Running game is okay,
but
they play
okay against this run defense is great against other run defenses.
Yeah, okay,
so they should be able to run the ball.
It has to be. It better.
Yeah,
be.
They have to run the ball. I'm not scared of the Colorado defense at all, especially when it comes to stopping the run. So if they commit to the run and then get them to cheat up a little bit, then maybe Raiola can make some plays. I think the physical versus non-physical nature of these teams will clash. Now, when you have Shedeur Sanders on the other side, that's what the X factor is of, all these super good skill players they have and guys who are top 10 picks so they can be the equalizer. But over a 60-minute game, that's what Matt Rule certainly needs to make this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Colorado looked pretty good in their opener. I know it was a struggle. I know there was some officiating that went their way. We didn't bog down on that like a lot of people did. But, there were some things to definitely, I guess, dock them a point or two here and therefore, but ultimately they got the win, man. Like everybody, I know overreacting is what we do, but I mean, ultimately they won that game and found a way to do so. And I think that gives you some confidence moving into this next one, but certainly the test is much different. And I think there's just a lot of interesting dynamics here from, Big 10 versus Big 12, Dion versus Rule, and by versus, I mean, just, coaching up a game and putting plans together and trying to outsmart the other one. I'm fascinated in the chess match there. And I think just, who plays better of the quarterbacks in that duel of the young Raiola and then the star in Shedeur Sanders, the true senior. I think that's going to be electric back and forth to see who emerges with the better game when all is said and done. And Shedeur will probably have way more opportunities based on just how the offense runs. But I'm fascinated to see Nebraska's defense and how they try to just force Colorado into playing their style of game and, trying to, make this, a tough game for Shedeur. I'm fascinated by that chess match, knowing how defensive minded Matt Rule is. That's the one angle I'm most excited about because Shedeur is such a great player. And look, he's going to make his plays, but yeah, this is a juicy one. If you're Colorado, this would be a huge, huge win. I think for Nebraska, it would be a huge win as well in the non-conference. So big game in Lincoln. It makes me a little bit more hesitant to roll with the Buffaloes. And even if it was in Boulder, based on what we saw last week, I think Nebraska is a more total package. I think Nebraska is better overall if you put all sides of the ball together. And I think that is, along with home field, going to give them an advantage to win this football game. But Shedeur, never count him out because he can make a play out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's so fun to watch. I mean, he is, and he's going to get time, he's going to make time, and that's when they become dangerous. I still am not sold on Nebraska's run game, even though they had a lot of yards against UTEP. It was UTEP that they have a dog that can go 50. There's not many that can, but someone that could pop one and take it 50. They are, by the way, played very well in his return after last year not playing much at at UT.
Yeah, Isaiah Nayer got in the end zone, and that was great to see. He went to Texas. I thought he would be great there, and he just never seemed like he was healthy, either that or a combination of just having too much talent in front of him, which at Texas, like right now, they're just rolling when it comes to wide receiver talent. So he went for greener pastures, and I think that's worked out well for him in week number 1. But you're right, like Nebraska's run game versus that revamped Colorado defense will be very interesting. What can Colorado try to scrape together on the ground? And then again, if they can't do anything, does it really change much? Because that's basically been the case since Dion was there, they've never been able to really run the football all that effectively. So again, the chess match and what they try to force Shedeur into how they force him into trying to do what they want him to do. I'm very curious about that. And then, I think Raiola is going to have to make some plays with his arm. I don't think you're just going to run the football on Colorado. I think you can have some success doing that, but I think you are going to have to make some plays through the air, particularly if they aren't able to corral Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn and those guys. Right. And it turns into a bit of a shootout. That could get really, really interesting. But I'm so ready to watch this game. I'm really, really intrigued, much more intrigued. Last year I was intrigued, but I'm much more intrigued this year. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Nebraska has a competent quarterback, and they did not have that in this matchup last year.
I do know this, that you hear about this defense, and it does. Last year they were one of the better ranked defenses in the country, but UTEP on like their second or third drive went like 3 plays and 75 yards. It made it look easy. So that I was like, my God, the Colorado should have a few of those opportunities too. Now, we go to the 2 schools in Arizona. Arizona State won big against Wyoming. Kenny Dillingham and company, they're now at home against Blake Shapen, Jeff Levy, SEC Mississippi State at Sun Devil Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, I like this one is going to be really interesting because if Mississippi State and Arizona State are both improved, and I know Mississippi State fans were thrilled with the spread offense coming back and all that. In Starkville, this is a big game to me for the Big 12. To anytime you get a chance to beat an SEC opponent, even though this is not the top tier of either league right now, but it's a big moment for them. They're at home. They showed that they could do last week. They've got something to play for this year, so they've got some athletes on that squad. We know very little about how their current team is going to work constructed because it was so different last year than what they're going to be. And so far, so good. They beat a Wyoming team that usually is tough to beat in the opening games when they're playing against, and they're non-con. They're one of those teams that fight you to the death, but they did really well. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this one plays out too late at night. I think that Mississippi State probably has the edge, but we really don't know all that much about Arizona State.
Arizona State's favored last I looked, although it's by not much of a spread, and they are at home. But I think you could easily pick Mississippi State in this game and feel pretty great about your chances there. I do think, and Grayson brought this up on our podcast, I was already thinking of it anyways, though. But yeah, this is not Craig Bowles, Wyoming that they played.
No. You're right. Yeah.
So it's great they got the win, but this is not like the team that went and beat Texas Tech. That's not that same Wyoming team, but it's still a win. And you didn't really know what to expect if you're an Arizona State fan rolling in this year. So to win convincingly, to win running away, and not ever have to really sweat it. Not even the first. By the end of the first quarter, you already knew what the end of this game was going to look like. So that was great. That was really, really encouraging. They're going to be able to, run the football pretty effectively this year. Beyond that, I think Sam Levitt had a pretty nice game. Definitely has room for improvement. But as far as the first game out there, I think it was encouraging. I need to learn a lot more about Arizona State. And I think this will be obviously a great game to learn quite a bit about them, because even though it's not the class of the SEC, Jeff Levy and Blake Shapen had a really good first week, and that is a dynamic offense, and it's the offense that Shapen should have been playing in all along, and not what he was always playing in when he was at Baylor. And he appears to have a much better O-line because he wasn't getting his head knocked off every other play like when he was in Waco. So if you can give him protection, you remember the Big 12 championship game, like he can sling it around, and I think he's in a really good spot. So this is going to be a huge challenge for the Sun Devils defense. Are they up for the challenge? I think they will be, but you could tell me Mississippi State wins this game, and I'd be like, yep, I could totally see that. You tell me Arizona State wins this game, I could totally see that as well. I don't have a great feel either way after seeing them both play just one time, but this is an important game in terms of bragging rights, in terms of perception, and certainly for Kenny Dillingham, it's a huge game, because if they could start off 2-0 after the way things started, that would be a really big thing for his football program.
It'd be a heck of a thing, no question. Arizona with that Fafita McMillan combination, we knew their defense, though, obviously a little shaky in their game, but they're at home against Northern Arizona in week number 2. I think did they just name their score here too?
Yeah, I don't, probably shouldn't have to play Fafita and McMillan all that much, but yeah, they should be able to name their score here. But what Tenero and McMillan did last week was ridiculous. It doesn't even matter like who you're playing in a game where you have, 304 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns. It's just unbelievable. And he showed, he's in competition to be that one of the top wide receivers taken in the 2025 draft. So yeah, they should be able to name their score here. I don't know how much deeper you can go into this, but yeah, their defense has to play better than it did against New Mexico for sure.
The defense was really rocky for good stretches of that game. I think it got better as the game went along. Towards the end, you got a feeling of like maybe this is just one of those first game jitters, first game adjustments type thing, and it's not as bad as it appears. That's what you're hoping, at least if you're Arizona. You're hoping that that's not what you're going to be seeing week in and week out. But I said all off season, I didn't think they were just going to not skip a beat on defense. Y'all remember I was talking about Johnny Nansen leaving, and I know they said, well, the transfers that left are young guys that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's like, yeah, but that's still depth that you had that was designed to play in that defense that's now suddenly not there. And they didn't lose like large numbers, but you still lost freaking Johnny Nansen. Like, losing coaches matters, especially if they were really successful. So them having a hiccup in the first game was not surprising, but is it going to be a longer lasting thing? I don't know that we know that yet, and we're not going to know that after this weekend. This is a name your score game. We'll see Arizona get challenged much greater in the next few weeks, but I think this is one of those where Fafita and McMillan probably play the quarter and a half, first half, something like that. I don't think you're going to see them real late, throwing TDs like we saw last weekend, although that was awesome last weekend, and they needed every bit of that to win that game. They're a lot of fun. They're going to be a lot of fun. I think they're right there in the pack of contenders, but this week's not going to tell us much of anything. They just got to stay healthy and get out of this one.
All right, so we have gone down the list from the various pods.